so many fantastic things about living in Puerto Rico, but there's some downsides too.
In this video, I'm going to tell you how it is I came to live in Puerto Rico, sharing the pros and cons that we experienced so that you can get a better idea of whether or not moving to Puerto Rico is right for you.
So the hubby and I moved to Puerto Rico in 2014 because we were looking for overseas adventure. Our kids were getting older, they were leaving for college. We'd been in the US our whole life. We were actually thinking about moving to Chile because we just wanted to get out of the US and live someplace different. So while we were down in Chile, we read a report about these new tax incentives that Puerto Rico had come out with. So we cut our Chilean trip short and we flew up to Puerto Rico to see if we could actually live there. So we rented a place in Palmas for a month because the Google pictures were the prettiest, and we kind of explored the island in that month that we were there, and we figured, yeah, we could live here, let's do it. It was a lot closer to the mainland US than Chile, which is so far away. So if we needed to get back to the States to help our kids, we could do that. And the tax incentives were definitely a bonus. So we decided to make the move to Puerto Rico. And we went all in on this move. We packed everything we owned into a 40-foot container. We shipped it all the way across the ocean to Puerto Rico. We bought a house. We weren't even going to buy a house. We were planning to rent, but this house came up for sale. It was beautiful. We just fell in love with it. I know you're not supposed to do that. I remember after we'd been there for maybe about a couple of weeks before our furniture arrived, I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, what have we done? This is such a foreign place. We don't really speak Spanish very well. Everything is foreign. The plants are foreign, the birds are foreign, and we don't know anybody. What are we doing here? But slowly we started reaching out. We met our neighbors who turned out to be fantastic. Slowly we started integrating into Puerto Rico. So, pros and cons. Pro number one are the beaches. There are gorgeous beaches everywhere. When we moved to Puerto Rico, we were now 8 minutes walk from a lovely beach, more than one beach actually, and it was fantastic. Everywhere you go around the island, there are all kinds of different beaches. There's these white sand beaches with rocks and caves, and then there are these other beaches that are maybe a little more pebbly or darker. There's the Rincon beaches, and there's the Caribbean beaches with the aqua blue water on the south coast of the island. I mean, just all over the island there are so many, there must be thousands of beaches. I mean, we explored a lot of them, but there are so many that we've never ever seen, and I'd say that's probably pro number one to living on the island. Pro number two, I'm gonna say, are the beautiful interior mountains. They're just so green and gorgeous, and some of them are just jaggedy and they just cut right up into the sky. And there's just all these beautiful jungly plants there. My favorites are the Australian tree ferns, because I know whenever I see them that I've come into cooler temperatures, which is another thing I just love about the mountains of Puerto Rico. It's just so much cooler up in those mountains. And then you have all these gorgeous little mountain towns. They're just, you know, they all have their adorable colonial plazas, and they're just so charming, and they're just so tucked away. And driving in the mountains is such the adventure. You know, you have all these windy little roads and these beautiful little homes, and you don't know what's around the next corner, and they're just so much fun to explore. So yeah, I'm gonna have to say the beautiful mountains of Puerto Rico are pro number two. Pro number three are the people of Puerto Rico. They are generally so warm and so welcoming. I mentioned our neighbors. They were just the kindest, nicest people. They invited us over. They invited us to other things. It was fantastic. You know, even the people who sold us the house, we had lunch with them. I mean, they were just so welcoming to the culture. I remember walking down the beach one day in Dorado, walked past this whole family. They were having some party. I started talking to the grandpa of the family or whatever, and he's like, yeah, come on over, have a beer. You know, it was just like, you don't even know me and you're inviting me to your party. But that's how Puerto Rico is. They're just open-hearted and warm and loving people. They have big families, and they have this wonderful sense of family values, and there's this sense of respect for the elders in the family. I mean, that's kind of the impression that I got. So I really love that also about the Puerto Rican people. The next big pro, number four, to living on the island is that it's a big tourist destination, which means there is so much to do on the island. I mean, just even in San Juan, like old San Juan and the forts, there's shopping and restaurants, and there's so many beaches and so many neighborhoods to explore. And then you get out in the car and you start driving around the island. There's just so many beautiful little towns, whether they're in the mountains or on the coast. I mean, you've got weekends galore exploring that island. I like it that it's big enough that you can drive around to the other side and feel like you've really gotten away. Plus, there's always some kind of festival or event happening on the island. I mean, there's just always a gathering somewhere. And then there's tons of outdoor activities. So from regular surfing to kite surfing, to hiking, to zip lining, to doing Jeep tours around the island, or ATVs off-roading. You can go hunting for waterfalls. There's scuba diving and snorkeling, and you can fly to the islands nearby. I mean, you've got the whole Caribbean pretty much at your fingertips, where you can cruise on a boat there, you can fly there really quickly. There's horseback riding, boating, sailing. Anything you can do in the water, you can do in Puerto Rico. There's hanging out on the beach. It's just full of things to do. And pro number 5 is, if you're lucky enough to be a high income earner, then the tax benefits can be a huge thing for you. I mean, if you're making $100,000 a month and you're in the States giving half of that to Uncle Sam for who knows what, for you to move to the island and live there at least 6 months a year and shelter some of that, and yeah, there's cost to that. Like on the island, you're going to be expected to pay some fees and contribute to some charities, and you're going to be a part of the economy while you're there. But I mean, given the tax savings that you could realize, it might be totally worth it. So yeah, if you're in that category, that can be a huge, huge win for you moving to Puerto Rico. So definitely worth looking into. So what do you think about these pros? Are they worth moving for? Put your thoughts in the comments below. All right, so those are the pros. Let's talk about the cons. So one of the biggest cons for me was number 1, the weather. Now I know a ton of people are gonna put the weather in their pros column, but for me, it had to go in the cons column. It was just so hot and humid and oppressive. I mean, I always tell people there's 2 seasons on Puerto Rico. There's hot, and then there's less hot. That's it, it's just hot. And I wasn't used to that. I come from the Western US, where it's very dry and you have winters. I mean, if I wanted to go out for a walk, I had to get up at the crack of dawn and go out really early, because if I went out too late, I would just start getting headaches from heat exhaustion. So it was hard for me to get exercise outside there. I mean, on the plus side, it was warm enough that the ocean was actually warm and I could get into the water in the summer, which is something I typically can't do because I'm really sensitive to cold as well as heat. So yeah, that was really nice. It was fun to get into the ocean with a beer and just hang out. Couldn't do that anywhere else in the world. But overall, I found that I missed winters. I like the snow. I like the shorter days. I like getting all cozy in my house. And then there were the hurricanes. I mean, we fortunately escaped for Hurricane Irma and Maria, and we thought we'd be gone for maybe 2 weeks, but it turned out to be way more serious than that. And we couldn't come back for 4 months because there was no power and there was no internet. We're not retired. We need power and internet to do our jobs and make a living so that we can pay our mortgage and the bills and all of that. So we spent those 4 months couch surfing, and that actually kind of reminded us of what life is like up north. And I think probably that experience was a turning point for us, where we started to begin to think about leaving the island. But that was just us. So con number 2, crappy infrastructure. Maybe it's gotten better since we left the island. I know that PREPA has changed hands, and so maybe it's more reliable, but we would have the power go off kind of randomly for a couple days, couple hours here and there. Sometimes the internet would go down for a few hours, and it's really hard when you're working and you've got deadlines and you're trying to make a living and you can't count on power and electricity. So that was kind of a problem. Also the roads. I mean, I know the roads have gotten better since Maria because a lot of money has come in to repair the island in the aftermath of that, but driving around the island last time we were there, I mean, yeah, some roads are better and some roads are still, they're crappy. I mean, there's like potholes the size of pigs on the road, and they're rough on your car, and they can seriously damage your car. I mean, I don't recommend getting a nice car in Puerto Rico because you're just gonna like mess it up on the roads anyway. So, that's kind of a negative. That's a con for living in Puerto Rico. And then also along those lines, I'm gonna have to say traffic and parking. So traffic, you know, around San Juan and a lot of the towns is a problem. There's just a ton of cars on that island. I think there's more cars than people on that island. People love their cars in Puerto Rico, but yeah, they're everywhere. And so traffic is a problem. Parking is always a challenge in Puerto Rico because I don't know who designed all their parking lots, but every lot seems to have the teeniest, tiniest spaces possible. Like just everywhere I went, there were these teeny tiny spaces that you could barely fit into, and so everybody has to like spend 5 minutes trying to maneuver into these tiny spaces, you know, so they're either going in forwards or they're trying to back in, and then meanwhile everybody's waiting for this one person to try to fit into this teeny tiny little space with some big car. I mean, oh my God, parking in Puerto Rico was just such a pain. So yeah, that's a con. And then the other thing I'm going to throw into the infrastructure bucket is trash, landfills. You know, it's an island, and so there are limited places to put trash. And I know they've got a landfill problem where the landfills are filling up. Now, maybe they've made some progress on this problem. I know they're working on it, but some of the landfills are actually becoming hazardous to the communities around them because of all the seepage underneath. Speaking of trash, that moves us into con number 3, which I'm going to call the messy human landscape. So this is like when you're driving down the roads in Puerto Rico, down a highway, and it's just a clip art explosion of signs everywhere. I mean, there's big signs and little signs and red signs and blue signs and green signs, and there's flags and balloons, and it's just like this visual clutter on both sides of the street everywhere you go. You know, it's like there's no zoning laws or anything around signs. You can just do whatever the heck you want. You know, and then related to the trash, there's trash on the streets. There's trash in the ditch by the side of the road. There's trash on some of the sidewalks. You know, there's just trash on the beaches and in the jungles and on the trails, and you know, there's just trash all over the island. And then you've got your abandoned buildings, and some of them have graffiti on them, and I'm not talking about the really cool artsy graffiti like you see in Santurce, where people have taken a lot of time to create art. There's just a lot of trash around the island, and it's really sad because it's such a beautiful island, and I don't understand how people can just trash up their home like that. I just don't get it. But yeah, that's kind of a con to living there. Con number 4, I'm gonna have to say, is crime. So there's a reason why people live in gated communities. It's because crime is a factor on the island. I think in terms of homicides, it's pretty high compared to a lot of other countries in the world. But then I think petty crime is far more prevalent. I never really felt unsafe in Puerto Rico. I mean, there's certain areas you don't go into because the crime is more prevalent there. A lot of it is drug related, but you know, they did have the occasional homicide or carjacking or something where inexplicably somebody was just killed and it wasn't necessarily drug related. So it's just a factor that you need to be aware of. I mean, when I went to strange places, I was mindful. But again, I generally felt safe on the island. You know, as for petty crime, I mean, I did have a little experience with that. There was a teenager that actually tried to break into our house while I was in it and steal our Xbox. So, you know, I heard this like weird noise on the back door, and I was upstairs and I kind of looked down over the balcony to see what was that crazy noise on my back door, and I saw this kid and he was trying to jimmy the lock, you know, and break in. So I don't know why, but I went all crazy lady on him, and I ran down there screaming like, and I scared the crap out of this kid, and I ran outside and he ran away, and I chased him around the side of the building, and I screamed, "What are you doing?" You know, I mean, I was probably a Karen moment. I just went full crazy on him, crazy white lady. And you know, he ran off. But yeah, I lived in an area where it's gated, but you know, there's holes in the fences everywhere. And the neighborhood next door, which, you know, wasn't the best neighborhood, and I think the kids would come over and they knew that a lot of the places around me were vacation places, and they would just kind of see what they could get. But that's a thing in Puerto Rico. Like if you have a place in the country and you're not there and you don't have a caretaker or a neighbor watching it, I mean, people feel like they can help themselves in some cases. So it's just a factor. You need to be aware of it, and it is kind of a con to living there. Okay, so con number 5, I'm gonna call this the party manana culture. Now, again, this is one of those cons that a lot of people would put into their pros. Like, yeah, I wanna party like there's no tomorrow every day of my life. You know, and I respect that. Good for you. Puerto Rico sounds like the perfect place for you, but for me, that's just not where I'm at in my life. Puerto Rican culture is loud, and they love their music, and they love it at deafening levels of sound. I mean, when they have a party, they turn that music up so loud that you can hear it 2 cities over. I mean, it's that loud. And they party into the night. I mean, even on Sunday night, they'll party all night long. It's like, don't you guys have to go to work on Monday? Don't you have a job or something to go to? It's like, they don't care. They're just gonna party all night long. And then they have these speaker trucks that kind of drive all over town, and you'll see them a lot during election season, but you'll also see them as a form of delivering the news in some of these smaller towns, or whatever message about Jesus they want to share. And these speaker trucks, they drive around, and they're like really loud, and if you get stuck behind them, it's like, what? I remember the first time we encountered one, we were driving like on Highway 3 between Humacao and Guaynabo, these little country roads, you know, and we heard this noise behind us, and we thought it was the radio that we couldn't turn off. Like, what is this noise? And we kept trying to turn it off, and it turned out it was a speaker truck behind us, and it was delivering a church sermon or something, you know. So it was just, this is part of the culture. It's one of the reasons to live in a gated community, is so that you don't have these speaker trucks driving by your house making all this noise. At least you're a little bit insulated from that. But yeah, it's a really loud culture. You just have to get used to it. And the other thing is the whole manana attitude, like, you know, service is like, yes, 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 we'll get to you whenever. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can go to some places and they have some really fabulous service, but more often you're going to places and it's very la-di-da, oh yes, you're here, oh, we'll get to you whenever. And then if you go into a government office to try and get something done, they truly, I mean, you know, they smile, but they really don't care what your problem is. They don't care. This is their job, maybe they hate their job. I don't know, take a number, wait for 5 hours. I don't care that you waited for 5 hours. I mean, it's just a different thing. And I think it's pretty prevalent throughout Latin America. It's not unexpected, but yeah, it's something you just have to go with. And if you can't go with it, then you're gonna have problems there. So, you know, I'm pretty go with the flow, and I was okay for a while. But, you know, then when I got to the point where I had to get things done, it was just hard, and it did start to grind me down a little bit. So yeah, the party manana culture, that can be a con for some. So this is just me at my stage of life, given my background with my personal experiences. You may love everything that I said was a con, and maybe you'll hate some things I said were pros. It's, you know, everybody's different. So just, you know, keep that in mind before you start flaming me in the comments. But yeah, I really enjoyed living in Puerto Rico. I mean, it was a fantastic cultural experience. I mean, we really, you know, we lived there for a while, and we really integrated as best we could. And yeah, we probably should have learned better Spanish, because that's the one thing I think that held us back, is our Spanish was very, very rudimentary, but it was a great experience. And so if you get the chance to move down there and experience the culture for yourself, I highly, highly recommend it. So what do you think? Did I miss anything? What are your pros? What are your cons? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And don't forget, if you need help finding a really good real estate agent on the island, click the link below. Tell us what you're looking for. We're happy to hook you up. If you close something, they will pay us a referral fee, and that's partially how we support the channel. So we appreciate the opportunity, and we'll see you in the next video.